Hey everyone, welcome to Judging for the Win. I'm Dave and this is my daily ruling. Today's question was suggested independently by a few viewers after coming up in a Reddit thread. Amy's Grizzly Bears dies while she controls Valkyrie's call and Youthful Valkyrie. Does Youthful Valkyrie get a +1/+1 counter when Grizzly Bears is returned to the battlefield? If you saw my recent video about returning Enduring Tenacity with Emerge from the Cocoon, you should remember the takeaway that when you're resolving a spell or ability, you follow the instructions in the order that they're written, and different sentences in the card text correspond to discrete steps in the resolution. With this being the case, you might expect that, in the case presented in the original problem statement, the Grizzly Bears would be returned to the battlefield, and then it would become an angel, which does not match the trigger condition of Youthful Valkyrie's ability. Unfortunately, this doesn't correspond really well with most people's expectations for this kind of effect, specifically the people at Wizards of the Coast who designed the rules, and that's why we have this rule here. It says that when an effect puts a permanent onto the battlefield and says that permanent is a certain characteristic, the continuous effect making it that characteristic applies simultaneously with the permanent entering. Applying this rule to the concrete example that we're considering, this means that the effect that makes the Grizzly Bears an angel applies as soon as the bear is in play. Accordingly, an angel has entered the battlefield, so Youthful Valkyrie would trigger. Now, another question that came up in connection with this one is, what if Amy also controlled a Giada, Font of Hope? Would the Grizzly Bears enter with additional +1/+1 counters? Well, if we're just going based off common sense, you would probably say that the answer to this question should be exactly the same as the previous one. Either they both should work or they both shouldn't. But we all know it's never that easy when it comes to Magic. The catch is that unlike Youthful Valkyrie, Giada puts the counters on as a replacement effect, and these function differently in the rules. A replacement effect does not react to an event happening in the game like a triggered ability does. Rather, it proactively modifies an event before that event happens, so that something else happens instead. You can see the issue. The Giada's replacement effect applies immediately before the Grizzly Bears enters the battlefield. We already said that the continuous effect making the bear into an angel starts simultaneously with that event. So that means the Giada will not consider the bear to be an angel when the Giada ability is applying. Therefore, the Grizzly Bears will not get any +1/+1 counters from Giada. Now, I can already feel a bunch of you starting to write comments that say something along the lines of, now hey, hold on a sec, Dave. I know this other interaction where the game does take some continuous effect into account when it's deciding whether to apply a replacement effect. And I think you should definitely finish writing those comments because they help out with the algorithm. But that is a valid concern. Whether we're talking about Blood Moon plus a Shockland, or Root Maze plus Mycosynth Lattice, or some other similar example, there obviously exists some way for the game to take continuous effects into account when it's deciding whether a replacement effect should apply. So why wouldn't the same thing work in this case? Well, like before, the rules team at Wizards of the Coast has seen this sort of issue, and it's not very intuitive. And so they came up with a rule that's intended to make situations like this work sensibly. When a permanent is entering the battlefield and you're deciding whether a replacement effect applies or how it applies, you check how that permanent will look when it's on the battlefield. While doing this, you take into account any replacement effects that already have modified how that permanent enters. So for example, if you cloned an angel, then the Giada would see the clone was going to enter as an angel, so you would get the counters in that case. Also take into account continuous effects from the permanent's own static abilities that would apply to it once it's on the battlefield. So if you chose Angel while playing an Adaptive Automaton, then the Giada would apply to that since it has a static ability that makes it the chosen creature type. And finally, you can take into account continuous effects that already exist that would apply to that permanent. So if you had a conspiracy naming angels, then all of your creatures would benefit from the Giada. Unfortunately, like we said, the continuous effect from Valkyrie's Call does not already exist at the time immediately before Grizzly Bears enters, which is when Giada's replacement effect is deciding whether or not it should act on the Grizzly Bears. Accordingly, the Grizzly Bears will not get any +1/+1 counters here. If you'd like some more information on this sort of interaction, including a clause-by-clause breakdown of that rule that was on screen earlier, and tons more examples, check out my video on Enters the Battlefield replacement effects that I published a couple of years ago. But that's all I have for you today. How did you do? Join me again next time for another daily ruling. Until then, I hope you have a great day.